Welcome back to the PC podcast. I'm Paul, the serious one.
And I'm Cole, the fun one. And today we are diving into my post-surgery journey, the good, the bad, and the things that were a little bit more weird.
I can't wait.
Well, if you missed it on our last episode, we talked around my lifetime struggle with obesity. I got up to 355 kilos. It was nearly 56 stone. And what happened next is I was eligible for bariatric surgery, and I went through a long process to get there. And we're now going to talk about what happened next.
All the juicy stuff?
All the juicy stuff.
Look forward to it. So, Cole, we're thinking about your surgery experience. Just give me a flavour of what happened up to the day. Who were you talking to? Type of surgery? Thoughts you had? Anything like that?
So I was referred from my GP to a Homerton hospital in North London, and it actually took about 18 months from that referral to being, in effect, on an operating theatre.
And why so long?
Because you've got to go through a series of medical, physical, and actually mental health tests to basically make sure that you fit all of the criteria, that you're ready for surgery, and that you know, particularly for me, I was one of the largest that they'd ever done in that hospital. That, you know, your body's going to cope with the anaesthetic. Going through an anaesthetic is like running a marathon, and they've got to basically be confident that your body's going to cope with it.
Did you feel like you were trying to just get through the process? Was it, or did you feel as though that was really important in terms of making sure you got the best outcome?
I guess for me, I just wanted this to happen as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So there's times when I felt frustrated with that process. There's times when my anaesthetist, for example, kind of held me back. Or there's times when there wasn't the resource in the NHS for particular sets of tests, particularly around mental health, because I've suffered from binge eating, whereby I was just frustrated by that process.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if I hadn't have had that process, if I hadn't have had that 18 months of reflecting and understanding and reading every support group on the internet about bariatric surgery, watching every YouTube video, every episode of My 600 Pound Life, I don't think I would have been in the right place for it mentally.
And so is that what you'd say to other people?
Absolutely. And I think if you rush into that process, then it's not going to work for you, because you're not going to know how to deal with it. And you're not going to edit. Yeah, you're not going to make some of the changes that you need to make, because how I describe this to people, and this is with living post surgery for nearly a year now, and then also 6 months on Wegovy before my surgery to get ready for it, is surgery's great, but it's like playing a game of 10-pin bowling with the guardrails up.
Right.
And if you don't learn to improve your form, and if you don't learn how to hit a strike, once those guardrails come down, you're still going to end up
You're going to be in trouble. Yeah. Okay. Cole, in that period leading up to your surgery, what were the things that you had to change, and how was that?
So the weight that I was at, they were very, very deeply concerned about putting me under the anaesthetic. They were very concerned about my mental health. It's fair to say, obviously with having both bulimia and binge eat at various points throughout my life. And it was about getting down to that weight where the anaesthetist was comfortable that I wasn't going to be a major risk on the operating theatre.
Yeah. And so you've got 18 months, you've got those concerns going on. What worked, what didn't, what drove you, what didn't? Are we just going for the surgery and you were full on?
In the distressed, semi-permanently distressed state that my life was in at that point, all I was focused on was the surgery.
Mm.
And it was like, it was almost like I was giving myself over to the surgeon, to John, and this is your problem, you fix it.
Yeah.
You deal with it. And it probably wasn't until the incident on the jet bridge at which I realised.
So you just felt like you handed over your life, your body, the problem as such to the surgeon.
I wanted them to fix me. Yeah, I wanted them to fix me. And that was the turn. That's why that incident was so crucial, because I think that was the mindset change that I needed.
Which incident we're talking about?
So it was falling over on the jet bridge.
Okay. Yeah.
That was so crucial and so debilitating that I needed then to do something different. I needed to take some responsibility in this process, which I hadn't done up to that point. And that was the point at which I went out and went on semaglutide, Govi.
So I'm struggling with the couple of things you said there, so I'm going to try and sort of work through them, because you sort of said you handed this problem over to the surgeon, but you'd taken responsibility. Explain those two things to me, because it almost sounds like you've handed it over.
No. Sorry, and I don't know whether I was clear. In the 18 months of that journey, and probably in 2 phases. The first year, when I'm just coasting through this process, expecting them to solve everything.
I see.
And then I get this in effect, bit of a setback, that my weight was so severe and it was so much of a risk for them that the anaesthetist wasn't happy and wasn't comfortable operating on me. And then it's like, well, I need to do something different.
Oh, I see. Okay. That makes more sense. So I'm going to recap. So you've had a year of that 18-month period where you'd probably not taken it as, not seriously, but...
No. You're actually, you're right.
Right.
I didn't take it seriously.
Right. Okay.
Because I'm just expecting them... I'm expecting this is a mechanical process, and somebody's going to go in and they're going to chop off half my stomach,
Get it.
and I'm going to come out thin.
Yeah.
That was in my head.
Yeah. Okay. It's really interesting, isn't it, that you're going to go through this massive procedure and you've sort of handed over responsibility, and then this event of you falling on the jet bridge really sort of brings to right in the forefront of your mind, you actually need to get on with moving forward on this. Okay. So you're in this period of leading up to your surgery. Give us the few weeks before. What happens then?
So it's not just straight into surgery overnight. You've generally got to do what's called a liver reduction diet, LRD, LSD, liver shrinkage diet. And basically, when the surgeon kind of goes in, they have to lift your liver out of the way. And it's like a physical clamp that goes in and lifts it up. And because, generally speaking, livers, especially in these patients, are quite fatty, you've got to basically help shrink it down. And that involves one of the worst diets you'll ever do in your life. And dependent on your surgeon, you do it for between 3 and I've actually had some people down to do it for 6 weeks.
Wow.
And there's a food version of it, which is, I think, kind of quite high protein, and I can't even remember what foods were on it. But they're basically, most people are advised to do the milk diet, which is pretty much 12 pints of milk a day? Yeah, I think every day I was going through 3 4-pint cartons of milk. So that is a lot of milk to drink.
Wow.
And you're allowed a salty drink. And that's it. And and you can have like one of those Hartley's 10-calorie jelly things as a treat. And it's so weird. Kind of, I drink a lot of coffee, so I would just incorporate the milk into coffee and have like lattes all day, which was fine. I'm probably drinking a bit too much caffeine, but hell. And then for my salty drink, I would create these weird concoctions to get through this. And I'd add like some beef stock in, and I'd add some sort of thyme and rosemary, and that was kind of like bolognese. Or I'd add peri-peri sauce into it, so that it was kind of like having like a Nando's. And it was just to get through and to have something savoury, because it's obviously milk is naturally quite sweet.
Yeah.
And I've got very much a savoury tooth. And yeah, I had a big celebration at the end of that, where my final drink of milk was out of a champagne flute. That was literally the night before.
Wow. So that sounds awful. The flavours bit, though, what was... Did you just experiment with them yourself, or was it...
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's some guidelines that you're given, and there were certain things that you were allowed to add into that salty drink, like stocks and things like that. So it just meant, I thought, well, if I experiment with them a little bit and some of the different sort of flavoured stock cubes you can get, just meant there was something there that was more than this milk.
Yeah. So that sounds an awful thing to be following at that period, you said it yourself.
So it's really odd because you start, and I had to do it for 3 weeks, and you get into the mindset of it in the first 2 or 3 days, and then I was like, okay, if I'm going to cheat, I need to cheat now. But then I've unbroken it. Yeah, I'll get back on it. And then by the time you're a week into it, you then can't cheat.
Right.
Because you're like, I've come too far on this.
Right.
And it's just like it's outside of your comprehension to go elsewhere with it. And the interesting thing was 3 days before my surgery, it was one of my friend's 40th birthdays, and we were going to see a show in London, and we were going for a meal. It had all been planned long before the surgery date had been put in place. So I'm sat there in the Ivy in London with my 2 friends eating these wonderful steaks and everything and all the trimmings, and I'm sat there with a latte.
I hope you had a cocktail stick to celebrate.
No, I didn't. And the show was really good afterwards. But...
Perfect. Yeah. So we're at the night before now. Let's go there. And I've probably got 2 things to ask. What was going through your head, and were you scared?
Yes, but in a very relieved way, because everything had become sort of manageable by that point. Although my weight had come down through Wegovy, I knew I needed the surgery. This was almost last chance to lose. And what was going through my head was, I didn't know if I was going to survive this. It was a risk. The anaesthetic was a risk at that time. I was down to just under 300 kilos by this point. But there was still a genuine fear there, and I stayed in London the night before my surgery, because my surgery was done in a place called in North London, and I stayed in a hotel, and I didn't sleep particularly well, and I was up at about 4 a.m. because I was quite excited but nervous but scared.
Yep. Mix of
emotion.
Yeah.
And I remember ringing my best friend and kind of telling him that if I didn't make it, well, actually, I didn't tell him. I told his partner that basically, if I didn't make it, all of my will, everything was left to their 3 kids, my nieces and nephews. And she didn't take it particularly seriously. She went, "Oh, you're being an idiot. You're being an idiot." And I'm like, in my head, I wasn't. Mm-hmm. And obviously, looking back post of it, the fear was legit.
That's still what you felt, though. Yeah. Okay.
I also remember thinking, if I died, at least I died fighting obesity, than dying of it.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So that's a pretty big moment.
Yeah, it was. And then the morning of the surgery, it was a really bright, sunny day, and it genuinely felt like starting a new chapter. And it was, but it genuinely felt like that. And I remember, because I was nil by mouth by that point, complete fast ahead of the surgery. And I remember going down to the hospital. One of my best friends met me there. She was kind of walking through the process with me. Gets to, and I was walking still with the crutch at that point. I was down from 2 to 1, so it was an improvement, but I was still on 1. And get to the ward. The check-in time for it was 7 o'clock. It was all very, very strict and very procedural. And got put on the bed. And I remember thinking, this is not a very big bed. And there was some of the nursing staff were kind of flapping around. And this very matronly sister came over and she went, I'm not happy. We were told we were having a bariatric patient. We haven't got bariatric beds. We haven't got bariatric gowns.
Oh, wow.
And then they bring in this tiny little chair because it needed to be weighed. And I said, I don't really think that's going to hold my weight. What's the weight on this thing? And she goes, oh, this goes up to 200 kilos. And I'm like, well, I know I'm over 200 kilos. She's like, okay. And then there's another part of the hospital that had all bariatric scales in. And I actually had to take them down there because the staff on the board didn't actually know that part of the hospital existed. And these are very general surgical ward as opposed to specifically about bariatric patients. So I went down, got weighed. And then thankfully in that time, they'd managed to find or get a hold of a bariatric bed, which they have to hire in, especially for bariatric patients. Then they didn't have the bariatric gowns. And at that point, like, my waist was probably about 70 inches.
Okay.
And my surgeon was quite frustrated at this. And he was like, this operation is going ahead. I don't care what happens. This surgery is going ahead. And if you've even got to go down in your shorts, we'll sort it out.
Yeah.
And thankfully they took a very pragmatic approach. They ended up wearing two gowns, one on the back, one on front.
How does that feel, though? How did it feel at that moment? Were you frustrated or just thought, sod it?
I didn't care. I'll get on with Eric. Yeah, okay. I'm past Eric at this point.
It's not right, is it? It's not right. I mean, these things should be sorted.
Yeah, they should have been. They should. They should have been. And obviously, I'm not the only person that goes through this.
Yeah.
My one proud achievement was walking, because for some reason, and I think this is quite consistent with bariatric surgery, is you don't go into a kind of sort of pre-op room. You actually walk into the theatre. And I don't know why they do that, but I've heard it been quite common. And I struggled to do it, but I didn't take my crutch down. And the nurse actually turned around and she said, oh, you can take your crutch. And I went, no, I don't want to. I want to do it without.
Why was that?
Because that crutch had become such an albatross around my neck.
Right.
And doing that walk without it felt really good, even though it was hard. It's harder, and I had to stop. There was there was a mental symbolism for that. Yeah.
Right. Wow, that's really.
And it was kind of cool actually, because you walk into the theatre, and I've always loved transport and trains and planes and all this type of stuff. So like being in the control room of a train service or whatever has always been kind of cool. But you walk into an operating theatre and you realize, oh wow, this is like the bridge of the Enterprise. And it's actually, there's so many lights and alarms and sirens, and it's like, oh wow, this is really interesting. This is like it's what you see in the film.
We're out totally nerd territory.
I was nerding out. I was also talking about some quite nerdy things around things that train drivers do, that pilots do, but it's called human factor science around how you work as a team and things that you've got to do in a safety critical environment. And I was talking about that with the anaesthetist about how they have to have those same principles. There might have been an element that I was just nervous, so I was kind of going to what I knew and understand, but it was interesting.
Right. Moving on from that sort of nerdy spiritual experience, let's what then happens?
So I get to put to sleep, and because of my size, the anaesthetist, who was this absolutely wonderful doctor, I can't remember her surname, but her first name was Sam. She was absolutely amazing. She'd pre-briefed me. We'd sat down. She talked about how, because of my size and the risk, what was probably going to happen was I was going to wake up. I'd feel really groggy. I'd feel awful. I'd go straight to intensive care because they were worried about the risk to my breathing system and stuff. And I'm probably going to spend 2 nights in intensive care. And then I was probably going to spend a night on the ward. So I was in hospital for 3 weeks. So she'd warned me of this catastrophe that was about to happen. And I was kind of mentally prepared for feeling awful and horrific. Get to put to sleep. Wakes up in the recovery room. And I have no grogginess whatsoever. It was literally like somebody had pressed pause and then pressed unpause.
Right.
And I just felt wide awake straight away. completely compass mentis. And I remember looking down at my stomach, and the first words out of my mouth was, "Oh my God, did my liver shrink enough?" And then,
What did you imagine it hadn't gone ahead or something?
yeah, I was worried. That was probably it wasn't my biggest fear. My biggest fear was probably dying.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I didn't want to go through the surgery and then not have the surgery.
Of course.
And my question was, "Oh my God, did my liver shrink enough?" And then a lot of the research that I'd done, Dr. Google, was that most people have 5 ports. And I'm like, "Oh my God, why have I only got 4? Did it not go right?" And my surgeon kind of came around and he went, "Will you shut up?" In a kind of very jovial Irish way. And he went, "It went absolutely fine. Everything was clear. Your liver had shrank perfectly. It was all textbook. There was no kind of hernias we had to fix or anything. Just focus on looking after yourself." And then again, kind of went into this panic mode of, "Right, okay, am I going to intensive care now?" And the anaesthetist kind of laughed and she went, "No, there's no need to." "Well, you said I was going to intensive care. I'm probably the only person that wants to go to it." Or like some kind of weird hypochondriac. And basically,
Because you never dramatise anything.
No. I was straight back to the ward, and I was discharged the next day. So I was in hospital for around about 28, 20.
So how did that feel, though? You were straight through, everything worked. What were you thinking at that moment then?
I was on top of the world, if I'm honest. I was a bit tired because I'd been up early.
Yeah.
But there was nothing particularly unusual. And I came out of hospital, got on my sort of medication and everything all sorted. And because I live quite far from the hospital, I decided to stay in London for a few nights. Just if anything went wrong, if there's any complications, I could go straight back to my team, rather than having to rely on a where I live up in Cambridgeshire. And to be honest with you, it just went really, really smoothly. By sort of day 3, I was feeling absolutely fine. There was no real pain. The biggest pain that I had, actually, and I'm hopping back a little bit, is post-surgery. In effect, they pump your sort of stomach full of air to enable them to get in to do the work, and that gas becomes trapped.
Right.
And you'd lean back and it'd come to the front, and you'd sit forward and it'd go at the back. And you can't just fart it out because it's not like
It's nothing in there. That's in the right place.
yeah. So you kind of got to walk it off. And actually, that was one of the best feelings in the world, was getting my shorts and t-shirt back on and getting out of the bloody hospital gowns, but actually walking around and walking that off. But that was probably the most discomfort that I had in the whole process. Everything else felt fine.
So I remember 2 things at that moment. One was, did you post something on that day saying you were done? Because I can't remember, but it was very quick. I'm sure I saw a post basically saying it's done. I was like,
yeah, there's an episode, and some viewers will be aware of this TV show, Absolutely Fabulous. There's an episode where Eddie and Patsy go into hospital, right? And I think Eddie's having a toenail removed or something, but of course it's majorly dramatic. And I just posted a picture of Eddie in a surgical gown post-operation and saying, "Back to me, all sorted."
Brilliant. No, because I remember I thought, yeah, it's amazing that you're all right. First for me that you're all right, and then secondly, holy, that it'd gone so quickly.
I think it was about 2 hours until.
So, out of hospital, couple of days in London, give us next bit. What was significant about the next few bits?
It was very much around learning to eat again. So you've got a very prescribed life in those immediate sort of 3 months post-surgery, and it steps up from a liquid stage for 3 weeks, and each hospital and each surgeon sort of has slightly different ways in which they work it, but broadly speaking, you're in a liquid stage, which very much feels still like the milk diet. It's high protein, it's just runny liquids.
Yeah.
Which I remember experimenting with different. You could sort of bring soups in at this stage,
Okay.
but they had to be very, very runny soups. I remember kind of experimenting with different ones, and there's some awful ones that these like Maritime protein soups that you can get, which are absolutely horrific. I don't think I had a single one of them. I think I did and tried it. I was like, no. And then you're generally on about sort of, if I remember rightly, about 600-700 calories a day for that 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And then you step up to, but they don't particularly ascribe you any target for that. It's just
a little bit.
Yeah. And then the next stage was sort of pureed food. So you have it by a hand blender. And actually there's a lot of, in the lead up to surgery, is making sure that you've got everything in that you need for surgery.
Okay.
And, for me, it was going out and buying a hand blender.
Right.
To make sure that the pureed stage went pretty smoothly. And that was literally, you'd have to blitz everything, and you'd find yourself being full after sort of 2 or 3 spoonfuls.
Right.
And they give you kind of what's called the 20-20-20 rule, which is where you should never eat anything bigger than 20 pp. So you need to chew it 20 times, and you have to wait 20 seconds from finishing one bite to starting the next.
Yeah.
And I actually kept on my kitchen counter 3 20p pieces.
Right.
And that was the mental reminder to follow that.
Right.
And even now, that's kind of become ingrained. Yeah.
How was it? How was that? I mean, how did it feel? Sort of, obviously, from what your diet would have been before to then, was the information that you received controlling it? Was the sort of surgery controlling it? Were you controlling it? What did you feel?
A combination of everything. And I talked earlier about bowling with a guardrails on. And I very much think that's what it was.
Right.
Because the only way you're going to hit the strike is to still work some of that detail yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And it's very different if you go privately, the level of support that you get is different to if you go at NHS, to if you go private abroad. And I think down the NHS route, the clinical staff are great, but they're stretched so thin that actually that support isn't always there.
There's minimal support through the process.
Yeah, and you have to. It's where you have to take some responsibility, and it's where I think our support group, the Obesity UK support group on Facebook, is so powerful because everybody has their story in there. There's so much shared experience there that actually there's a real richness in coming to those forums and talking about.
Yeah, and telling people their stories and asking lots of questions. I mean, that's the thing I always really like, is just how supportive people are of each other with the information that they need at those critical stages. Okay, so any weird post-op experiences?
I mean, poo is weird.
Is it?
Yeah. So, I mean, passing your stools is, they can be very watery. Some people can be really constipated.
Right.
I was quite lucky with it. I was passing regularly, maybe because I was drinking coffee. And then I guess when you start introducing normal food again, so from about week 8 onwards, it's knowing what is going to work with you, because there's certain foods that I just won't touch now.
What when you say that, what drives that? Is it a feeling? Is it the taste, the texture? Is it how it feels when consumed? And
so some people have had really weird experiences with this. I've got a friend who can't eat carrots. Like they will not sit in her stomach. She brings them back straight away. For me, anything bready just doesn't sit very well with me.
Right.
So to the point at which I'll actively try and avoid it. But it's just finding your road around that and navigating through it.
So the bread, does it make you feel uncomfortable?
Really uncomfortable.
Right.
Really.
Okay. Right. So it drives your behaviours. That's just say absolutely. Okay. So bring us to date, Cole. 9 months on. What's worked? What hasn't?
Yes, and I mean 9 months post surgery, but obviously this journey's been a little bit longer. I have now lost 21.5 stone as of this morning.
Wow.
So 337 kilos. No, 137. yeah. I get it. Does appear. I weigh 20 kilos now. That's a whole different podcast. 137 kilos in total.
Right.
Wow. And it's safe to say that everything has changed. Everything has changed.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a conference this morning with work. Whenever I've had to do that previously, I've been stood up. Well, I've been presenting. I've had to ask for like bar stools to be brought in because I couldn't stand up. You know, I stood up and gave a 10-minute presentation today, you know, in that very natural style that I have. And that felt amazing. That I came out of the conference and me and my colleague walked, you know, a 15-minute walk back to the tube station. And it was just kind of, that would never have happened.
Yeah.
You know, I've flown probably 3 or 4 times around the world with the air miles that I've clocked up since that surgery. You know, that's travel is my passion, and I'm back to doing that now. And yeah, literally everything has changed.
So new lease of life or big change, or what? How would you put it into perspective for people?
Completely. And I know everybody doesn't have the same journey post surgery, but it genuinely feels like the last 18 months have been some of the easiest of my life.
Really?
Yeah. Like,
is that what you expected?
No, I didn't. I mean, you know, I do a lot of weight training now, which I adore. I'm in the gym 4 times a week. And it's the first time in my life when I've really enjoyed physical activity. Like, I genuinely, I go to the gym to chill out now.
Yeah.
Like, that's my enjoyment. I normally train sort of first thing on the morning. And I genuinely feel like on days when I'm not training, I feel like my things don't feel right.
Yeah.
And people I've heard people say that you have said to me you don't feel right if you haven't been for a run.
Yeah.
And I've never understood that. Yeah, I've never understood that mentality. Like, that's genuinely a part of my life now.
Yeah. But it sounds as if it was easy.
It's felt easy. Not there's been challenges within it, but it has felt fundamentally like this has been easy.
Right. Which is great.
And not everybody has that experience.
No, I know they don't, but it's great that you've had such a positive experience of it. And I think on that note, it's time to close. That whole journey, we spent a lot of time, haven't we, really getting inside your journey, and it's a really incredible journey, a fantastic journey, and an incredible transformation of where you are now. I mean, 137 kilo weight change is amazing, and you know, the fact that it's been easy for you is great. It is really great. So that's it for this episode. Thanks so much, Colm. Any words from you? Any final words of wisdom on that point?
Just for anybody who's thinking about going through this process, sign up to our Facebook groups, Obesity UK support group. Continue listening to this podcast. Look at our Instagram channels. Look at our LinkedIn. We're here to support you.
Brilliant. We'll sign off there. Thanks, Cole.
Bye, Paul.